Here are some URC takeaways from round 3. And yeah, great weekend of rugby it was as well. Some really interesting talking points. I've got some questions to ask. Don't have all the answers, but I'll do my best wrapping up what we learnt from this weekend of rugby. And look, if you appreciate the content on the channel, I'm Tim, and this is Egg Chasers. And if you really, really love the URC and you want more people to appreciate just what a great competition the United Rugby Championship is, then it would really help me and the competition if you could drop a little thumbs up on the video. Takes you no time, costs you no money, but it really helps, as does dropping a comment down below. And I would love it if I would earn your subscription. So I'm going to cover off the fact that this weekend, all the South African teams won. All of the Welsh teams lost. So a bit of an assessment about where the power is lying in the URC as it looks right now. Edinburgh and Benetton, are they in trouble? Are the Lions a legit team? Are Leinster the standard bearers? And yeah, those are the things I'm gonna cover off. I will say, I think all of those questions, relatively hard to judge because there's a bit of nuance here, isn't there? I mean, here's the results from the weekend. Just one thing I will say as a bit of a takeaway from the URC is when you get well-matched teams, and sometimes a weekend happens where you have a load of matches that are really, really closely fought, it can feel incredible. On this particular case, there were 2 matches that were within 1 score, but there were games as well which had points differentials of 34, 31, 28, 26, 23. There are some mismatches in the URC, and I think being constructive, that's one of the things you've got to say. Sometimes the fixture list throws up games which are done and dusted at half time and make it a little bit less interesting to watch. I mean, looking forward, look at round 4. There's some absolute belters, not least Leinster against Munster at Croke Park. Already over 70,000 tickets have been sold for that one, which is mind-blowing. And that just speaks to what incredible moments the URC can serve up. Sometimes the moments don't feel quite as special. I mean, you would have loved it if you were a Lions fan in Johannesburg, watching them rack up 55 points against Edinburgh, but that was an absolute beatdown. And there were a few fixtures like that. So it's interesting. I think for the most part, the URC is shaping up really nicely. And some of the top teams are very, very good. There's clearly a gap to some of the teams at the bottom. And when you have a league with 16 sides in it, that is always the risk you run, that the spread of talent between top and bottom is going to be massive. But there is a bit of context there, because you look at this and you look and think, well, Cardiff, look at them flying high with 2 wins in their first 3 matches. And look at this. Edinburgh haven't got a win yet. They've lost all 3 games. Benetton have only managed to draw. What's going on with those 2 teams? The context there is, well, Edinburgh, who have they played? Edinburgh have played Leinster and the Bulls. And Benetton have played Leinster and... I can't remember who's the other team they played. Glasgow, wasn't it? Very good teams who you might not expect them to win. You probably would have... Benetton would have been expecting to beat Scarlets, but Scarlets got a draw. Fair play to them. And Edinburgh might not have... I mean, you might have expected a Lions win against Edinburgh. The concerning part is the manner of that defeat, which I will get into. But all I'm saying is I think it's going to be a few weeks yet before we can really start to work out how this table could stack up later on this season. But there are some signs there. And I do want to start with that game in Johannesburg. Because Edinburgh, I've already talked about it yet. Yeah, they've lost 3 games. They've played 3 very good teams. So it's not panic stations yet, but I don't know. Is it far off it? I mean, where do you draw the line between the Lions being really, really good, which they were, and I do want to come on to them because there's lots of positives, and Edinburgh just being woeful? It looked at times like it was defence optional for Edinburgh. And to me, and you know, if you've played rugby, you'll understand this as well. You'll know the first indicator, the best indicator, certainly in my experience playing, and I think you see it when you watch as well, the best indicator of a good atmosphere at a club is the defence. And when you've got a bunch of lads, even if they end up losing games or they're not the best team, if you've got a team that are highly motivated, really cohesive, together, buying into the coach's vision, then you quite often see a team that's defensively really organised. They might lose, but they go down swinging. The manner of Edinburgh's defeat, 48-0 at half-time, which is a record in the URC. 48-0 is an embarrassment for a team with 11 Scotland internationals in their side. There is no situation and there's no team that Edinburgh should be playing where you get that kind of scoreline. And I don't want to take it away from the Lions. I will come on to them. But it just seems to me, I would say there's alarm bells should be ringing at Edinburgh that there is something fundamentally wrong. Because when you see defensive performances or lack of like that, I think it speaks to something fundamental going on within the group, behind the scenes. I don't know. There's something that needs to be addressed. So that's definitely one to watch. But flipping over to the Lions, who are so easy to love, aren't they? The rugby that they play, and with the absolute ballers that they've got, JC Pretorius, Quan Horn, Frankie Horn, and Edwill van der Merwe, they have just got wildly talented players. And I mean, I don't know. What do you think? Are they the best coached team in the URC? Because what they get out of the talent they've got is brilliant. And, you know, they've been constantly facing the situation where they know if a player does really well, he's going to get picked up and paid a load of money by the Sharks down the road, like Hendrickse, for example. So, I mean, they're such a fun team to watch. It's just a shame. Brilliant stadium. And I was there at Ellis Park a couple of months ago, or a month ago, wasn't it, for the New Zealand game. Just an amazing stadium. It's a shame to see rugby like that happening with such a small crowd. I wonder, is there another stadium they could play somewhere else in Johannesburg that would be smaller, that might create a bit more of an atmosphere? But if they keep playing like that, the attendances are going to keep turning up. So well done to the Lions. Absolutely loving watching them play. Can they keep it up? Munster versus Ospreys. It's not often you see a team nilled in the competition, and biblically bad conditions. What do we take away from this game about these two teams? Well, I think there's a bit of a comparison I would draw between Edinburgh and the Ospreys. The Ospreys got nilled. It wasn't as abject a performance as Edinburgh's, and Munster were very good, just like the Lions were. But do you draw a parallel between Edinburgh and Ospreys, that the 0 in their score column, and albeit the conditions were bad, but they were bad for both teams, and the fact that Toby Booth, their head coach, has announced that he's going to be leaving at the end of the season, and that's always a very difficult thing for a squad to deal with, and it throws up a little bit of uncertainty. Who am I going to have to impress to get a contract? Am I going to get a contract next year? It just throws a little shade of doubt on the situation, and I wonder if that might be what's going on with Ospreys, because they don't look nearly as good as they were last year. They seem to have fallen a long way from where they were last year, and I wonder if that is what's going on. That said, for Munster, Tygburn, I mean, what a difference that man makes. He's an absolute warrior. Biblically terrible conditions. A record-breaking fast try by Shane McCarthy. I think fastest ever. Something like 10 seconds, 7 seconds, something like that. But the weather in Cork, just horrendous. Was never going to make for a fun occasion. And they picked up an injury or two, didn't they? So Mike Haley went off, which when you've got a thin squad like Munster have, that's something they need to try and avoid, especially going to Croke Park next weekend. And waiting for them are going to be Leinster, who had, I mean, Kieran Frawley played fly half. Maybe Leo Cullen must have been gagged and taped up and thrown in the back of a van for when the selection team sheet was being handed in, because how's Kieran Frawley ended up at 10? Finally. Only the 13th game of his entire professional career that he's worn the number 10 on his back. And he's clearly, and by a country mile, one of the two best fly halves in Ireland, the other being Jack Crowley. And that Frawley versus Crowley battle is on. The try that Kieran Frawley scored as well, with Gary Ringrose starting it, Jamieson Gibson Park running that brilliant support line, and the pass from JGP at full pace, 30 metres inside to Frawley, was just a thing of beauty. And yeah, it was some class moments. But Benetton, things aren't boding well for them. They have played good teams, and that is the context here. But Menoncello did not play well and did not look very good. So when the really good players for Benetton aren't shining, then you've got a bit of a worry, but I think they'll turn it round. I mean, I expected more from them, but I think they turned it round. And I think Leinster can and will get a lot better. It's early in the season for them, and they're about bubbling and being right at the right time of the season. So they're going to get a lot better. That said, they dispatched and dealt with Benetton in 40 minutes. The Bulls dished it out as well at home to Ulster, and the game was done and dusted relatively early. And the fundamentals for the Bulls look really good. They had Ulster's scrum on roller skates. They have, I mean, just having Lowe and Hanekom in your back row is just class. Norkia coming back with all that confidence from wearing green and gold, and the line out looked really strong. The Bulls look a serious rugby team. Ulster looked like they were, well, I mean, it hasn't helped having an Irish development squad at the moment, because they've got some people I didn't recognise the name of in that Ulster squad. That speaks to where Ulster are at, but they've always got a bit of something about them when they're at Ravenhill. So I'm still thinking Ulster are going to rise and be all right, and maybe make the playoffs. But I'll take that under advisement watching them for the next couple of weeks. They're playing Connacht next weekend, which will be a big game. I do like Werner Koch as a signing for Ulster, and him and Jacob Stockdale. Jacob Stockdale looked like old school vintage Stockers, so that was nice at least. So, but the Bulls, yeah, ominously looking very good as well. And it was all the South African teams won. Stormers managed to beat Zebre. No Sasha, no Marnie Libok, no Salman Murat, no Franz Malherbe. Still got Warwick Gallant on the bench, and a 36-5 win. Zebre are not good. Zebre are not good. And it doesn't help the competition, because I don't know how much better they're going to get. And this is it. I mean, I like the Stormers. I've got a bit of a soft spot for the Stormers because they invited me into their camp, and I got interviews with Dion Faree and John Dobson, which is in the channel, by the way. And if you haven't seen that, go and have a look at that. So I've got a bit of a soft spot for the Stormers. But they're not playing fluently at the minute. They won comfortably without playing well, which is bad news for Zebre. I guess that should be a positive for Stormers. And with all those players to come back, they're going to get better. But wasn't the most fun game to watch, despite an easy win for the Stormers. Dragons v Sharks, however, I mean, that was kind of, at times it was so bad it was good. And there were times it was just genuinely good. A brilliant match. 33 points to 30. A winning try for the Sharks. Deep into injury time. Textbook smash and grab from them. And I think the positive thing from, well, you could look at it glass half full or glass half empty. And the glass half empty is like, Sharks should be better than that. The glass half empty, if you're a Dragons fan, would be, how did we not win that one? But the glass half full, and I always like to look at things like this. Last year, if you're a Sharks fan and you were watching that, last year, you would have lost that 10 times out of 10, pretty much, for the most part. But this is the sort of win which actually hints to maybe an evolving mindset. I think John Plumtree's still got a job to do to sort of gel everybody together and get the box players buying in for the full season, and not just when it comes to the big money matches later on in the season, if they want to get to the playoffs and win these big Champions Cup matches. But in young guys like Ethan Hooker, Lorenzo Julius, they've got some serious players. And yeah, as I say, mentally, maybe they're starting to turn a corner because they managed to win that game. Heartbreaking for Dragons. And rather than moaning about a referee or anything, which I've seen a few people doing, that they should have put that game to bed, should Dragons. But again, they need to take the positives out of that and say they're kind of mixing it up a little bit better than they have been. It has been woeful for the Dragons in the past. And Cardiff have been making a good account of themselves, and they managed to score 6 tries against Glasgow, which will be a concern for Glasgow. Fortunately for them, they scored 8 tries, including an absolute worldie from this man, Sione Tuipulotu, and Hugh Jones and Sione Tuipulotu for club and country. The Huey Pilotu partnership is absolutely box office. I loved it. 36 points to 52. Absolutely crazy game. 78 points in it. No, sorry, 88 points in it. But both teams will be definitely having a look at defence. But as for the attack, I mean, some just really fun stuff. And Glasgow will be happy to come away with the win. Cardiff seem to be like they've got a bit of something, but we're going to learn more of that about them when they start to play some tough matches. Although what I will say is, because of the whole Shield setup and the way the fixtures work, where the Welsh teams all play each other twice, whereas everyone else only plays the Welsh teams once, either home or away. That means if there is a Welsh team that can kind of ascend and get good, then they've potentially got 6 wins just against their other Welsh rivals. So if Cardiff can do that, they're I mean, you've almost got 1 foot in the playoffs if you can win 6 matches against the other Welsh teams. You're getting close to being to gathering a bit of form that could take you towards the playoffs. So we will see. Connacht, I mean, you've got to love them, and to go and beat Scarlets 24 points to 23, 77th minute penalty. That was the only points from Connacht in the second half. The try just before half time by Murphy, this fella, Bundy Aki, is right to give him a big hug. It was an awesome try. Great to see Mac Hansen out there and scoring as well. And Paul Boyle off the bench for Connacht. Every time I see him, he just looks so dynamic. I really like him. The Scarlets, again, they lost, but they're showing a bit of something. So whilst it sort of seems doom and gloom, and I think there is a bit of doom around Welsh rugby at the minute, there is some green shoots. There's something you can start to build on, but I mean, for how long and to what extent? We're going to learn a lot more about that in the weeks ahead. I do think that with the URC, as I said, at the top end of that tournament, it's awesome. It's so good. And next weekend, Leinster against Munster, club rugby. I mean, I've talked about it before. It may be the biggest rivalry in club rugby, and over 70,000 people, maybe a full 80 odd thousand, going to be watching that game is absolutely incredible, and the envy of the world. And yeah, might be the biggest club fixture in the world. And the URC have got that in it. They've also got some really bobbins teams that are not good. And I don't know. When you've got 16 teams in it, I guess that's just a consequence. Hopefully, over time, the bottom can get closer to the top. But otherwise, we're always going to have the odd mismatch. But we're going to have some brilliant games as well. And next week should throw up more. There's just some thoughts. Tell me what you think. If that sparked any sort of conversation, get stuck in the comments down below. Looking forward to round 4 of the URC already. I'll have a little roundup of round 3 of the Premiership as well. And I want to make time and support and get behind club rugby whenever I can. Now, the international rugby's off the radar. I'll be doing that more and more. And so, like I say, if you want more people to hear and know and enjoy the club rugby that there is, get stuck in and support the channel. I'll see you on the next one.